I'm currently witnessing a situation unfold in real time that isn't being framed accurately. It's far more significant than fighter jets or mere trade disputes. What's happening between Canada and the United States right now represents the most crucial test of middle power sovereignty in a generation. The decisions Ottawa makes in the coming months will resonate for decades. What I'm about to share will alter your understanding of North American geopolitics, not the superficial narrative, but the deeper reality occurring behind closed doors where the cameras are absent. This is about a nation of 40 million people quietly determining whether it's prepared to say no to the most powerful country in the world. Stay with me, as what I'm about to outline will completely reshape your perspective on this situation. If you haven't subscribed to the Sarah Mitchell YouTube channel yet, do so now. We cover these shifts before they hit the headlines. Hit the notification bell because things are moving rapidly. Let's rewind not just 72 hours, but back to 2023 when Canada committed to purchasing 88 F-35 fighter jets from Lockheed Martin. The deal was valued at 19 billion Canadian dollars at the time of signing. By 2025, following a government audit, that figure had inflated to 27.7 billion due to cost overruns and delays, the typical narrative whenever a defense contract involves Washington. The first 16 jets are slated for delivery in 2026 at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona, with the physical arrival on Canadian soil not expected until 2028. The remaining 72 jets are now under formal review, and this review is where things become complex. Prime Minister Mark Carney took office in March 2025 with a platform centered on reducing Canada's dependence on the United States. Initially, this seemed like a reasonable political stance, perhaps a bit bold or idealistic. Then Trump began discussing making Canada the 51st state, threatened to annex Greenland, and escalated the tariff war. Suddenly, what was once a campaign slogan transformed into a strategy for national survival. This is where the story truly begins. Announcement number 1. This one hit Ottawa like a freight train. In January 2026, the United States ambassador to Canada, Peter, gave an interview that should have been front-page news everywhere. He issued what can only be described as a military ultimatum delivered with a smile. He stated that if Canada did not finalize its purchase of all 88 F-35 fighter jets, the United States would need to acquire more jets for itself and increase their flights into Canadian airspace to fill the gaps. He mentioned that NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, a partnership established in 1957, would need to be altered. Think about the implications of that word in a diplomatic context. It doesn't mean renegotiated or adjusted. It means restructured unilaterally on American terms due to what Washington perceives as Canada's failure to uphold its end of the agreement. American military aircraft operating in Canadian airspace without prior permission equates to sovereignty in name only. Here's the crucial connection. Under the current NORAD agreement, both countries have certain rights to operate in each other's airspace. However, what Ambassador Ora described goes far beyond that framework. He discussed the United States unilaterally assuming responsibility for Canadian air defense on Canadian territory because Canada made a procurement decision that Washington disapproves of. That's not an alliance, that's coercion. Canadians are aware of this shift. An ECUS research poll released in December 2025 indicated that 72% of Canadians now support purchasing Sweden's Gripen fighter instead of the American F-35. Not 52% or 60%, but 72%. This isn't just a polling margin, it's a political mandate, and the Carney government is taking note. Announcement number 2. This is the one that should send shivers down the spine of Lockheed Martin. Sweden's Saab Corporation has made Canada an offer that is strategically brilliant by any objective measure. Saab is proposing 72 Gripen fighters and 6 GlobalEye surveillance aircraft. But they're not just selling hardware, they're offering to manufacture it in Canada. This means assembly lines in Ontario and Quebec, creating 12,600 jobs in high-tech manufacturing, engineering, and software development, real industrial capacity on Canadian soil. Then there's the detail that changes everything. Saab is offering Canada access to the source code. Let that sink in for a moment. The source code, the actual underlying software that controls the aircraft systems, weapon integration, sensors, and operational capabilities. Canada would have the ability to modify, upgrade, and develop its own enhancements without needing permission from anyone, without waiting for approval from the Pentagon, and without filing requests with Lockheed Martin. In contrast, under the F-35 program, every software update requires Pentagon approval. Lockheed Martin controls every line of code. Canada cannot independently integrate new weapon systems or modify sensors without Washington's blessing. Defense analysts refer to this as a strategic choke point. In a deteriorating relationship, the United States could theoretically restrict maintenance, cut off spare parts, or limit software updates, leaving the entire Canadian fleet dependent on American goodwill. Saab is not making this offer blindly. Brazil negotiated access to portions of the Gripen source code, allowing them to develop their own capabilities and integrate weapon systems without consulting Stockholm. Saab is extending the same arrangement to Canada. Beyond the 72 jets for domestic use, Saab is already discussing using Canada as a production hub for potential Gripen exports to Ukraine and European customers. We're talking about 100 additional aircraft that could be manufactured in Ontario and Quebec for international clients. Canada wouldn't just be purchasing jets, it would be establishing a defense industrial base that it currently lacks. Announcement number 3. This is the aspect that hasn't been fully reported yet. The operational reality of the F-35 is far more complex than its proponents admit. The United States Government Accountability Office has documented this for years. The F-35 has a mission-capable rate that consistently hovers between 30% and 50%. This means that at any given time, between half and two-thirds of the fleet is unavailable for operational use due to maintenance, awaiting parts, or being grounded. Denmark, which purchased F-35s, has reported that their aircraft are in maintenance roughly half the time, leaving pilots without jets to fly. This multi-billion-dollar procurement decision is resulting in a fleet that cannot reliably get off the ground. Now consider the Gripen. Independent estimates place the Gripen's mission-capable rate at 80% to 90%. Operating an F-35 costs between $35,000 and $47,000 per hour, while the Gripen costs approximately $8,000 per hour. Over the lifespan of a 72-jet fleet, that difference in operating costs is not negligible. It's an existential budget issue. Then there's the Arctic, a piece that American commentators consistently overlook. Canada's geography is not comparable to Europe's or the Middle East's. Canada has vast stretches of remote territory, short and improvised runways, and extreme weather conditions that make standard logistics chains fragile. The Gripen was explicitly designed for these conditions. It can operate from highways, improvised airstrips, and frozen lake surfaces. Swedish test pilots have publicly emphasized that the Gripen was built for a country that expects to face threats the moment it takes off. It was engineered to function without relying on elaborate peacetime infrastructure or supply chains that could be severed. Former Canadian Air Force Lieutenant General Yvon Blondin has stated that the F-35 delivers 95% effectiveness in a confrontation involving peer adversaries like Russia or China. In contrast, the Gripen scores only 33% in that evaluation framework. Former Chief of Defense Staff Tom Lawson went further, describing the Gripen as nearly irrelevant in a high-intensity conventional war. These are serious arguments that warrant serious consideration. But here's the question that no one in the military establishment wants to vocalize. What war is Canada actually preparing for? If the threat model is a full-scale Russian or Chinese military offensive, then the F-35 is indeed the correct choice. No serious analyst disputes that. However, if the threat model has shifted, and the emerging reality is that Canada's sovereignty is being quietly eroded by its closest ally, with pressure coming not from Moscow or Beijing, but from Washington, then the calculus changes entirely. Trump has repeatedly referred to Canada as the 51st state, not as a joke, but as a policy aspiration. He has threatened tariffs as economic weapons and used NORAD as a bargaining chip. His ambassador has explicitly threatened military consequences if Canada exercises its own procurement judgment. When a country's primary security challenge is maintaining independence from its supposed protector, purchasing a weapon system that grants that protector a digital off switch over your entire air force is not a strategy, it's surrender. This is the part that alters the entire perspective. Let's discuss what's happening behind the scenes in Ottawa as the diplomatic calendar reveals everything. In January 2026, Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke at the World Economic Forum in Davos. He didn't mention Trump. He didn't need to. He quoted the ancient Greek historian Thucydides, "The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must." He then asserted, "We don't accept that logic. We refuse to accept subordination disguised as sovereignty." His speech received a standing ovation from heads of state and global business leaders. Trump responded the following day, stating, "Canada lives because of the United States," and revoked Carney's invitation to an unrelated diplomatic event. Carney's immediate and precise response was, "Canada and the United States have built a remarkable partnership, but Canada does not live because of the United States." This was not merely a domestic political performance. It was a signal to every middle power on Earth that Canada is choosing a distinct path. Carney backed this up with action. In January 2026, he made a state visit to China, the first by a Canadian Prime Minister since 2017, where he met with President Xi Jinping. They signed an agreement lowering tariffs on Canadian canola oil and Chinese electric vehicles, and Carney announced a new strategic partnership framework between the two nations. When asked about human rights, he stated, "We take the world as it is, not as we wish it to be." That line sent a clear signal through Washington louder than any press release. Canada is diversifying. If the United States intends to weaponize NORAD as a bargaining chip, Canada will seek relationships that mitigate its exposure. Carney has since signed trade frameworks with Indonesia and the UAE and is actively participating in European defense initiatives, positioning Canada as a convening force among middle powers. The fighter jet decision is not simply an isolated procurement choice. It is part of a broader strategic reorientation. Here's what most people are missing about the GlobalEye aircraft included in Saab's proposal. These aren't just peripheral additions to sweeten the deal. They may be the most strategically significant element of the entire offer. The GlobalEye is an airborne early warning and control platform built on Bombardier's Global 6500 aircraft, which is crucial because Bombardier is a Canadian company. Saab is proposing to establish airborne surveillance and coordination capabilities based on a Canadian platform, fostering Canadian industrial involvement in one of the most strategically valuable military systems available. Currently, Canada lacks an independent airborne early warning capability and relies entirely on American aircraft for that function. If relations with Washington deteriorate further, Canada could lose that capability overnight. The GlobalEye changes that equation entirely. Canada would have its own surveillance capabilities, integrated with NORAD and NATO networks, yet owned and operated independently. Swedish Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Want, a Gripen test pilot, has addressed this directly, stating that the Gripen can fully integrate into the NORAD defense network. He described the system's sensor fusion capabilities as comprehensive and competitive, asserting that the picture the Gripen creates of the battle space is just as complete as what the F-35 produces. It may be built differently, but the output remains the same. Now, let's discuss what happens next, as this is where it becomes critical. Industry Minister Melanie Joly met with Lockheed Martin executives in early February 2026. By all accounts, the meeting did not go well. Joly arrived with demands for a significantly increased economic benefits package beyond the current $15.5 billion in industrial offsets already on the table. She sought more jobs, greater technology transfer, and increased domestic content requirements. Lockheed Martin pushed back, and Joly was not satisfied. She left the meeting stating publicly, "We want more." This is unprecedented in the history of Canadian-American defense procurement. Ottawa is treating this like a commercial negotiation, not a security obligation or a political inevitability. The deal must work for Canada, or it simply won't happen. However, there's a detail in the Gripen proposal that complicates the sovereignty narrative. The Gripen uses an American-made engine, the General Electric F414. This means that even if Canada purchases Gripens, it will still need export licenses from Washington for engine components. Total technological independence is not on the table. It never was. But here's the critical distinction. The level of American leverage under a Gripen arrangement is qualitatively different from the leverage that exists under the F-35 framework. Washington could potentially restrict engine supply, but it could not remotely push a software update that grounds the entire Canadian fleet. The choke point exists, but it is narrower, significantly narrower. Here's where I think this situation lands. I see two paths ahead, and there is no comfortable middle ground. The next few months will clarify this. Path 1. Canada uses this negotiation to secure significantly better terms from Lockheed Martin, more jobs, more technology transfer, and increased domestic industrial content. Ottawa claims a victory. The F-35 deal proceeds, and Canada maintains full NORAD interoperability. The alliance endures, but in exchange, Canada accepts a procurement model where Washington retains a digital override on its Air Force indefinitely. When the next pressure campaign arises, and it will, Ottawa will have established that it can be influenced. Path 2. Canada opts for the Gripen. Washington retaliates, trade measures escalate, and American jets begin flying more frequent patrols in Canadian airspace, just as the ambassador promised. Lockheed Martin will lobby aggressively, threatening the 2,500 existing Canadian jobs tied to the F-35 program. The costs will be real and immediate, but Canada will control its software and build its own industrial base. Every middle power on Earth will watch to see if sovereignty remains a tangible concept or merely a term leaders use in speeches. I believe Carney is inclined toward Path 2. His Davos speech was not mere rhetoric, it was policy. The visit to China wasn't just a diplomatic courtesy, it was a strategic diversification effort. The demand for more from Lockheed Martin isn't just a negotiating tactic for a better F-35 deal. It's due diligence before potentially walking away. But I've been wrong before, and so have analysts who thought they had this figured out. The government's final assessment report was due in September 2025, but it is now February 2026, and the report has yet to be released. That silence is not an oversight, it's leverage. Every day the decision is postponed is another day Lockheed Martin has to enhance its offer, and another day Saab can strengthen its case. What I know for certain is that the Canada emerging from this decision will be fundamentally different from the Canada that entered it. Either it will demonstrate that a middle power can resist a superpower and survive, proving that sovereignty is worth protecting at a real cost, and that the rules of the post-World War II alliance system still hold significance. Or it will validate what realists have claimed for years, that when push comes to shove, smaller countries do what larger countries dictate, dressed up in the language of alliance and mutual benefit. 40 years from now, policy students will analyze this decision the same way we examined de Gaulle's withdrawal of France from NATO's integrated command structure in 1966, a moment when a nation decided what it truly was, not what its treaty obligations dictated or what its most powerful ally desired it to be. The jets are almost beside the point now. The Sarah Mitchell YouTube channel will continue to track this as it develops. Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Do you think Canada will stand firm, or does Washington possess unseen leverage? And here's the question I keep returning to. If Canada prioritizes sovereignty over security and pays a real price for it, does that make Carney a statesman or a gambler? Let me know what you think.